Captain America. It seemed a bit crazy at first, but after thinking about it, it started to make a little bit of sense. They were both recipients of a super soldier serum. One became a symbol of hope for an entire nation, while the other planned to murder a high school student in cold blood. But, of course, both characters have gone toe-to-toe with the Spider-Man of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to varying results, so it's an interesting discussion, to say the least. In this video, I will do my best to explain the differences as well as the similarities between the two super soldier serums, go over each character's feats, and then give my opinion on who would win in a battle between Norman Osborn's Green Goblin and Steve Rogers' Captain America. This video will be covering the Marvel Cinematic Universe characters only, so that means no comics or other source material that isn't canon to the MCU. For this video, I am considering Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3 as MCU canon because technically they are. So to begin, let's take a look at the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan. Prior to World War II, a German scientist named Abraham Erskine began working on what would eventually be called the Super Soldier Serum. Erskine's work caught the attention of a high-ranking German officer and head of science for Hydra, Johann Schmidt, who wanted to exploit the substance to make himself closer to the perfect man. Schmidt tested an imperfect version of the serum on himself, which in turn gave him a significant strength boost, but created horrible side effects. Johann became permanently disfigured and began going by the moniker of Red Skull. Eventually, Erskine fled Germany-controlled Europe for asylum in the United States. Erskine joined the U.S. Scientific Reserve, and there he was able to continue his work as a part of Project Rebirth, which aimed to turn the U.S. Army into an army of super soldiers. The serum, with a combination of Vita rays, is used on a volunteer soldier named Steve Rogers. The procedure was, of course, a success, and Steve Rogers went on to become Captain America. Both the imperfect and the perfect versions of the serum grant the user a number of enhanced abilities, but the imperfect version burned off the face of Schmidt, while the perfect version had no real tragic side effects. The serum not only enhances the recipient's physical abilities, but their personality as well. As Dr. Erskine stated, it enhances what is already within. So Schmidt's awful Nazi personality was amped up to an even more inhuman degree, while Steve's honorable core was enhanced to help him become the selfless Captain America. As for physical enhancement, the serum is very well-rounded. Steve enjoys enhanced strength, durability, speed, reflexes, endurance, stamina, intelligence, and even his senses are enhanced. Immediately after gaining his new superpowers, he was tested by the U.S. government and discovered that he was granted enhanced vision, could bench press several tons, comfortably run 13 miles in 30 minutes, and they found his memory to be near photographic. Additionally, his real-time analyzation and strategic planning skills were unmatched. One of Captain America's best calculable feats is during Age of Ultron, where he is able to shatter a portion of a reinforced concrete pillar by tossing Ultron into it. This feat comes out to 54,639,711 joules, or, in power scaling terms, meaning that his strikes would have enough force to destroy a small building. A small building was small enough to be destroyed with a punch. He can also easily destroy Ultron sentries, which are made from grade 5 titanium, and the amount of energy needed to obliterate these sentries is 45,786,000 joules, keeping his level of strength pretty consistent in his base form, meaning without building. Of course, Captain America would need to withstand the amount of force that his strikes can output, so his durability would be relative to his attack potency. As for his shield, it's of course made of vibranium, which can withstand the strikes from Captain America while wielding Mjolnir. In this form, Captain America gains power level 4, amplifying him far beyond what the Super Soldier Serum is capable of. So, being equal to Thor, Cap can output the same amount of energy as the God of Thunder, taking him from a small building buster to an island buster at the very least. For a more detailed breakdown of Thor's power, check out my 9-minute video on the mightiest against Avenger. Now, in this battle, we're not using Captain America, but I mentioned these feats to scale his vibranium shield above Thor's attack potency, making the shield itself island level. And Captain America doesn't really have any fancy equipment, at least compared to some of the other Avengers. He really only relies on the super soldier serum, his shield, and his skill, which is off the charts. After emerging from the ice, he spent years training in the martial arts alongside martial arts masters who were employed at S.H.I.E.L.D. Steve excelled in his training and eventually was considered second only to Black Widow in hand-to-hand skill. Now, to take a closer look at Green Goblin, I once again brought in the resident Raimi Spider-Man trilogy expert, Crisis, to explain power scaling within those films.
Norman Osborn, founder of Oscorp Industries, was falling behind on a number of military contracts, chief among them being the Army's desire to produce physically enhanced forces to place into the fields of war. Rushing to meet the latest of these deadlines, Norman would see himself become the guinea pig to a recently developed performance-enhancing formula with the hopes of unlocking the full potential of the human body and mind. Absorbed through the bloodstream via vapor inhalation, this formula would prove unrefined and would corrupt the mind of Osborn, amplifying the industrialist's latent vile nature, driving them into utter insanity. Not unlike the effects Erskine's formula had in the Red Skull, interestingly enough. Coupling these biological enhancements brought forth by the formula with powered armor, a supersonic glider, and an arsenal of weapons, the persona known as the Green Goblin would take to the skies, seeking revenge on those he believed to have wronged him, such as New York's sole protector, Spider-Man, whom Goblin sought to destroy after the hero denied Osborn's generous proposal. As showcased through Oscorp monitor data, the Green Goblin formula, as it were, would amplify moments of strength, agility, eyesight and senses, reflexes, intellect, healing abilities, and the rate with which he processed information, all to an astounding degree. He would showcase his amplified strength and speed through his scuffles with the Spider-Man, both native to his universe as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Wallcrawler. Furthermore, Norman's enhanced senses will be on full display as he all but discovered Peter Parker, making an attempt to remain hidden, going as far as to hear something as minute as a single drop of blood falling from the ceiling. The boost to Osborn's mental acuity and deduction would as well be shown off as he was able to put together that Peter Parker was Spider-Man simply by recognizing a cut on Parker's arm, with Goblin certainly only having the briefest moment to take note of the webhead's wound in the heat of battle. The Green Goblin would as well prove to be a reasonably skilled hand-to-hand combatant, performing a variety of punches, knee strikes, kicks, power bombs, mixed with an array of acrobatic flourishes all throughout his assaults. When looking at the attack power of the Green Goblin, we simply can't ignore his array of explosives as well as bladed weapons. His glider comes packed with bunker-busting missiles, wielding destructive capabilities around 1,482,809,600 joules, or around building level. His trusty trademark pumpkin bombs have been calculated to have a power output of 1,771,547,440 joules, again, building level. It becomes a little tricky when trying to place the Green Goblin's physical strength and durability based strictly off the Raimi movies. I have a whole 40-minute video on my channel pretty much breaking down all of the interplay between Tobey Maguire and his villains, but the long and short of it is, the only time Goblin ever scales to Spider-Man is in the parade, where Parker has only ever battled wrestlers and bank robbers up until this point, and later when he's greatly fatigued. When compared to a suppressed, standard strength Tobey Maguire, Goblin can really only hope to lean on his advanced weaponry to damage him at all. So essentially, for those wondering why Tobey's city block level scaling featured in Venom vs. Venom is absent in this video, It's because Goblin simply doesn't scale to Tobey when looking at the full context of the Raimi Spider-Man movies, again, barring some of his equipment.
Misery, 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 that's what's chosen.
Yeah, I know.
Which brings us to Green Goblin's battle with Spider-Man in No Way Home, where of course he is able to not only break Spider-Man's ribs, but completely dominate him in their battle and then maniacally laugh off any strikes received from Spider-Man. Keep in mind that up to this point, Spider-Man had consistently held back against all of his opponents. It's a major aspect of the film. Spider-Man pulls his punches until the very final battle. But despite Spider-Man holding back, Goblin is still able to harm him. And as Crisis mentioned, Gobby's bombs pack over 1 billion joules worth of explosives in them, and Spider-Man is able to tank one of these point blank. Compare that to Captain America, who is calculated at just over 54 million joules, so that's 32 times weaker than Goblin's pumpkin bombs. Now, as both characters, Goblin and Captain America, have fought Spider-Man and both won, you, of course, would like me to bring up the fight from Civil War. But you have to keep in mind that prior to Civil War, Spider-Man was the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He'd never fought a supervillain or an enhanced being at this point. His first real fight was with Winter Soldier and Falcon, then immediately he's put into a 1v1 with the greatest soldier ever. His inexperience would be a major factor, not to mention that he's holding back, as Spider-Man always does, and finally, at this point, Spider-Man doesn't even know his full strength. During the events of Homecoming, he is at his lowest point when Vulture surprises him with his wings and drops a building on the webhead. Spider-Man was convinced that he could not move the rubble off of him, but then found the strength to do so. After this, Spider-Man's feats become much more impressive. He's able to no-sell strikes with killing intent from Cull Obsidian, who ragdolled Iron Man, and who could catch strikes from Hulkbuster version 2, and keep in mind that version 1, a weaker version, could stalemate Hulk. Spider-Man's upper limits of strength weren't really achieved until after the events of Homecoming, and despite holding back, not knowing his full strength, not having mastered his spider sense, which he doesn't do until after Endgame, and being forced into a fight with the second most skilled fighter in the MCU, Spider-Man is still and hurt Captain America. Of course, Cap is holding back as well, but Spider-Man's inexperience in battle, as well as his inexperience with his own powers, doesn't make this fight with Captain America an accurate representation of what would happen if they fought after Far From Home, assuming Cap wasn't, an old dude. To take this a step further, Captain America is hit with and hurt by Crossbones' gauntlets. Spider-Man is also hit by these during Homecoming. However, the ones that Shocker used were enhanced versions created by the Tinkerer. So these gauntlets actually packed more of a punch than the ones Cap was hit with, and Spider-Man was able to get back up and then go on to battle Vulture. So to bring us all full circle back to the Green Goblin versus Captain America, Goblin is the stronger of the two combatants. He's not only tag and harm Spider-Man, who has mastered his spider sense, but one who knows the upper limits of his strength and has experience fighting the likes of Cull Obsidian, Evan Vulture, Mysterio, Doctor Strange, Thanos, etc., etc. While Goblin was of course able to take hits from an enraged Spider-Man who was holding back, this point scale Green Goblin to a full-powered Spider-Man, as Spider-Man's ribs were still broken and he was fatigued from fighting for essentially 2 days straight. Now, in a fight between Captain America and Green Goblin, I don't think it's an outright stomp for Goblin, despite being the stronger of the two and having more equipment. Steve's unparalleled skills will give him a massive advantage, not to mention his shield, which will be able to block or deflect any of Goblin's attacks, while giving Steve a range option to use over and over again. With Cap's immense skill, I could see him grounding the Goblin and getting into a hand-to-hand altercation with him. However, I see it going similarly to his fight with Thanos. Despite Captain America having a massive skill advantage, Goblin isn't unskilled, as Crisis mentioned earlier, and he can also pretty completely tag 2 different Spider-Men with relatively similar spider senses. Considering Spider-Man in Far From Home can literally fight with his eyes closed and rely mostly on the spider sense, this is a really good feat for Goblin. Eventually, Cap's strength disadvantage would prove to be his downfall more often than not. I think really it's a close fight just based on Cap's skill, but versatility, strength, and unpredictability of the Green Goblin would give him the edge 6 or 7 times out of 10. Thanks again to Crisis for joining me on this video. Be sure to check out his channel, which will be linked here on the end card. And also, let us know down in the comments who you think will win. Do you think Captain America actually would come out more times than not? Or do you think this Goblin absolutely stomps? Let us know and we'll try to keep it civil. Thanks again for watching, everybody. And remember the motto, it's super soldiers fighting each other over everything. And I'll see you guys next time.
Better loot all the machine carcasses here. I might find the parts I need. When I need it, I'll have to go to the machine site. Save the extra stuff for later.
Being the world's greatest detective is an aspect of Batman's character that many believe Matt Reeves was the first to truly embrace, but was it? Every live-action Batman had their fair share of mysteries to uncover and riddles to crack. How well was this portrayed by the various live-action Batman, and who is truly the great Bat detective? But before we begin, let's take a moment to thank today's sponsor, Scentbird. If you love Batman, but you want to smell like Bruce Wayne, Scentbird is right up your alley. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service, just as Netflix allows you to use the title. Scentbird gives you the opportunity to receive scents from over 600 brands in just a few clicks. And what's more, it's a flexible subscription that allows you to skip any month without penalty. For just $15 a month, fragrance to try every month for both men and women. This is the top brands like Prada, Gucci, and Versace, as well as series and details. If you're unsure of what might be perfect for you, Scentbird will help you find a fragrance you'll love based on your preferences, previous purchases, and a simple quiz. Don't get too intimidated. It's easier than solving a simple quiz. Scentbird is with a vibe that comes with a significant 8 times larger than the sample, which should last the entire month. Again, Scentbird is only $16 a month, but by using code THQ5, you'll receive 55% off your first month, which is just $7. So the sites I've tried thus far are Morning After, German Street, and Beyond. Morning After utilizes natural scents like Italian lemon, lavender, coffee, to make you feel fresh day or night. I'm a big fan of German Street, especially because our notes of pig and vetiver. While wearing this scent, I feel more confident and I say, another scent that I enjoyed, obviously, is Velvet, which has a more rustic vibe that feels appropriate in either high-end restaurants or just in my regular daily life. Good bottles of cologne and perfume cost anywhere between 500 or even more. In December, you get a luxury fragrance for only $7 not to mention all scents come in these stylish, decent, trusted, feel good, which makes you look good, and of course, you'll smell amazing. So a big thank you to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Again, it's only $7 using our code, so please check them out. If you support them, then you support us. So thank you once again, and let's get right to it. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the theories to determine which Batman is the best at traveling the chase. But before we get into all that, I want to establish the criteria upon which detective should judge. First, how proactive is Batman going out and actually doing detective work, trying to get ahead of the villain instead of simply reacting to the villain's escapades? Secondly, how complicated is the conundrum? Of course, the harder it is to solve, the more leeway we can give Batman, in that case. Lastly, do they ultimately solve the mystery? If not, how close do they get? Additionally, I will not be taking points away from any Batman who receives assistance with their investigation. I don't think this really needs to be explained in detail, but investigative work is typically a pretty collaborative effort, and Batman always works with Alfred, as well as some members of the GCPD, such as Jim Gordon, to track down and capture his villains. Working well with a partner isn't a negative, and bouncing theories and ideas off of another is a sign of a good detective who is able to use all the resources they have at hand to solve a mystery. Batman oftentimes has help, just as Sherlock Holmes has Watson. The Batmen we will be considering for this video are the quote-unquote modern version. The Batman from Batman 89 through Batman and Robin, and yes, before there are any comments claiming otherwise, Batman Forever as well as Batman and Robin are canon to Batman and Batman Returns. Of course, many of the actors from the original two Burton films reprised their roles in the last two films. There are also dozens of references to the previous events as well. Catwoman is specifically referenced in the final two films. Yes, the comic book series following the events of Returns exists, but it's just a split timeline. Both the events of that comic and the final two films are canon to Batman and Batman Returns, but the comics are not canon to the final two. We'll also be considering The Dark Knight, The Bat of Gotham, and Vengeance, those being Christian Bale's, Ben Affleck's, and Robert Pattinson's Batman, respectively. With that all being said, let's begin with the Batman who many consider to be the blueprint. Batman from Tim Burton's Batman universe. So, this Batman has the most to work with here. He has 4 feature-length films about his time as the Caped Crusader. So let's examine each film individually, and then add it all together to see just how he's able to put his deductive reasoning to work. I'll be providing as much context as possible, but I'm not planning on recapping the entire plot of each film. So, the movie begins with no real mystery, no immediate threat is posed other than organized crime, which the mayor and a district attorney already does plan to tackle head-on by capturing the notorious crime boss, Carl Wilson, to promote the upcoming 5-10 Batman at this time is doing his nightly prowling, taking down Wilson the criminal. Eventually, Bruce Wayne hosts a party at his manor where he discovers that Gotham's ruthless crime boss is planning to infiltrate Axis Chemicals. While Batman isn't actively working the case here, he does get pretty lucky that Jim Gordon about his fundraiser and speaks about a possible crime while there. but we all know the old adage, luckily when preparation meets opportunity, and Batman was certainly prepared, having set up a state-of-the-art security system which allowed him to monitor all of the Banner and Batman. So, Batman for that one. So things go terribly wrong at Jack Napier gets horribly disfigured and then starts calling himself the Joker, kills Grissom, and takes over his corporation. Meanwhile, the detail is working with a reporter to ascertain the identity of the Joker begins his insane machinations by poisoning Canadian healthcare products, which kills aliens and their television. The Batman starts looking over all the information to find on Jack Napier and finds that he was a detective. But he doesn't notice that in the same exact file, Jack Napier as a younger man is pictured. We're getting this later. Just keep that in mind. That Batman consistently dwells on the first step, so this is important to later. While possibly distracted by the detective work with the Joker, his evacuation to jail, he doesn't seem to realize that she is not really killing him, but working as well. However, Batman is able to deduce that the Joker was poisoning products from the source, and that the products are only lethal when used in specific combinations with other poison products. Eventually, Bruce Wayne comes face to face with the Joker, who, just before shooting Bruce, asks, "Have you ever danced with the devil?" This line triggered Batman's memory of the night his parents were killed, despite ruminating on this night for his power for his life. Sarah puts together that Jack Napier was responsible for their murder until this catchphrase is uttered yet again. Not sure if you would call this a blind spot, but it's pretty embarrassing that the world's greatest detective is unable to put this together prior to this moment, considering the fact that Bruce saw the killer's face and heard Jack's accomplice call out his first name. And remember that Jack's mugshot from when he was younger was also in his file, which Batman had apparently pored over. So he either couldn't put this obvious connection together, or was just too lazy to read the entire file. Either way, it's not a good look. I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked. After this, there's not really any more detective work done, so let's just move on to the next film. During the events of Batman Returns, Oswald Cobblepot, going as the Penguin, blackmails prominent businessman Max Schreck into helping Oswald become integrated with the same high society that had cast him out as a child. Upon hearing of the Penguin, Bruce immediately looks into his past in the circus, finding circumstantial evidence that leads him to believe the Penguin is a murderer. Bruce goes directly to Schreck and asserts that the Penguin is the leader of the Red Triangle Gang, but Schreck, under the influence of the Penguin's blackmail, dismisses the accusation, and Batman doesn't do much from here to continue the investigation. He becomes entangled with Catwoman, while his alternate persona, Bruce Wayne, hits it off with Selina Kyle. Of course, Batman is unable to deduce her true identity until much, much later. Eventually, the Penguin and Catwoman team up to take Batman down by framing him. Cobblepot kidnaps Gotham City Ice Princess in an attempt to frame Batman for her murder. Batman learns of her apprehension on TV, which unfortunately becomes the standard moving forward for how Bruce learns new case information, and that even happened in the prior film, The Joker. But continuing on, not only is the Ice Princess killed, but Batman is successfully framed for her murder. To make matters worse, while Batman was distracted, Penguin is able to hotwire or hack the Batmobile, taking control away from Batman and trapping him within his own vehicle. Despite narrowly escaping, Batman does have the wherewithal to record Penguin's mad ravings while Cobblepot was in control of the Batmobile. This may seem innocuous at first, but after years of working with the police department, we can assume that Batman thought this information would be pretty pertinent if Penguin was to be apprehended and a trial was to be set. So following this, Bruce ascertains the identity of Catwoman in a similar way to how he discovered his parents' killer, but the Penguin suddenly appears to kidnap Shrek's son. Already knowing the Penguin's plan, Batman was there to stop the kidnappings before they could happen. However, there was more to Penguin's plan. He had an army of penguins strapped with explosives to kill the citizens of Gotham, but Batman is able to stop him. It would have been nice to see Batman be a little more proactive in his pursuit of the Penguin. While he did put together that Penguin couldn't be trusted, he pretty much dropped all investigations once Selina came into the picture.
Yeah, that brother's starving.
While he was prepared to stop Penguin's kidnappings, he didn't do any additional investigating after Penguin was outed, which led to him being caught unawares when the Penguin revealed his bonding scheme. After Batman Returns, nearly all of Batman's detective work just goes out the window. The tone of this film is focused more on the action blockbuster aspect rather than solving any crimes. At the beginning of Batman Forever, Two-Face is attempting to rob Gotham's Second National Bank on the second anniversary of the day Batman first caught him. Batman arrives after the party has already started and tries to seem smart by saying this plan was so obvious and he should have seen it coming. Well, yeah. Of course, there were layers to Two-Face's robbery, which was really just a trap to lure Batman into, and Batman falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. The core detective work of this film centers around Batman needing to unravel the Riddler's riddles in order to stop his takeover of Gotham. Initially, Bruce meets Edward Nygma, a Wayne Tech employee desperate to show off his life's work to his idol Bruce Wayne. After Bruce rejects Nygma's offer to become partners, Nygma's boss cancels his projects completely. In a rage, Edward kills his supervisor, alters the camera footage using his new brainwave manipulation tech to make it look like a suicide, and then leaves behind a riddle for Bruce Wayne, which he seems to solve easily. The riddle states, if you look at the numbers on my face, you won't find 13 any place, which, even a child could solve, seeing as I solved this exact riddle as a child. The answer is a clock. However, the riddle itself really means nothing to Bruce. When the murdered Wayne Enterprises employee is found dead, Nygma is there and the police take his statement. While Batman didn't speak with Nygma at this time, it was very obvious that he had something to do with the crime, but after seeing the altered footage, the police rule it as a suicide then and there, with no further investigation. If they had simply done a sweep of the entire space, the movie was over at this point. They would have found Riddler's office full of question marks and riddle motifs and would have led them directly to the perpetrator, but everyone agrees, yep, suicide, and leaves it at that. While Bruce was somewhat skeptical, he does nothing to look into the actual crime scene, despite him having easy access to it since the crime took place in his own building. Edward then heads to Wayne Manor undisguised and leaves a riddle for Bruce at the front gate. I guess that Bruce had cameras set up within the manor in the first film. Never thought it might be a good idea to have them outside his home as well. The riddle reads, tear one off and scratch my head. What once was red is black instead. Bruce seemingly solves the second riddle just as easily as the first, but instead of doing any more investigating, he decides to visit criminal psychologist Dr. Chase Meridian to get insight into the Riddler's state of mind and possibly idea connections between the riddles. While this seems like a proactive way to spend his time, Bruce only went there because he was horny. Honestly, he was just trying to get it in, as he already knew everything Meridian was able to tell him about the Riddler.
My actions don't require any defense. In the same situation, I do it again.
A commitment later forces Batman to delay his investigation further to attend the circus where Two-Face attacks, killing the victim Grayson. Bruce decides to take in this adult man in his store, so he and Alfred spend some time doing that while Batman eventually he's called out by Batman to stop Two-Face yet again. Proactive, Riddler and Two-Face then pick him up, the diamond store, Batman turns up to stop it, and Batman spends the rest of the movie struggling to discover the Riddler's identity, even though the smallest amount of light work would have solved that in the first 15 minutes of the movie. He also spends some time following the traps devised by Two-Face, but after putting together the Riddler's secret identity, Batman becomes pretty much defeating the two villains and saving the day. Finally, we come to Batman and Robin, and I'll be perfectly honest here. Batman is horrible at being a detective in this movie. Early on, he explains Rick's backstory to Alfred and Dick, and you can assume there's a small amount of regular company, but all the information seems to be publicly available, and if it's not good. Or I believe covered the match massive Austrian Olympian and Nobel Prize scientist named Victor Fries becomes a massive Austrian civilian called Mr. Freeze. A 5-year-old could have put that one together, so I'm not going to give Batman the benefit of the doubt on this one. During this movie, Alfred is sick and dying, literally on the verge of death, and Batman didn't notice until Alfred was literally on his deathbed. Alfred had also been leaving frequently to visit the best doctors from all around the globe, something Bruce didn't seem to notice or care about at all, but somehow was shocked that Alfred was about to die. He doesn't find it odd that he was completely infatuated with Poison Ivy, even going as far to spend $7 million on her, and had to be given blatant proof by the police that Ivy and Bane assisted in Freeze's escape. From here, Batman starts to think, something is pretty fishy with this Poison Ivy lady. Maybe she is manipulating me. Eventually, he and the police make it to Freeze's lair, but he doesn't consider that it could possibly be booby-trapped, even though you'd think he'd learn after he fell into multiple Penguin, Two-Face, and Riddler traps during prior movies. He claims to have laid a trap for Poison Ivy at the end of the movie, but it was literally just him showing up. And then he gets captured and has to be saved by Batgirl. So yeah, I mean, overall, pretty embarrassing for the world's greatest detective. Alright, so the first Batman has been covered, and we've only been here 15 minutes, so let's get into the Dark Knight trilogy. After the critics and general public seemed to sour on Batman movies, the character was shelved for PS5, and he made his priorities again. Only when they focus on making Batman more realistic, the exact opposite over-the-top version is Batman's consideration. To that end, more focus was put on Batman solving crimes rather than the acting. Batman Begins is crusading to clean up Gotham by targeting the crime families as well as the political figures. After all, the problem in all production can and does them. Spying on the police and attorney's office, and eventually learns that Opposing plans to bring in drugs to the dock, so he breaks into interrogation of our enterprise, and why the people haven't stopped the shipment. Jim tells Bruce that not only is paying for the in between his investigation, Bruce continues to plan this most of the country. Eventually, the point uses microphones to spy on us. Flat. During this conversation, Bruce learns that the drugs will be arriving at the doctor's so after finishing up his battle, he arrives to the club. Operation. It is a office bringing drugs by sewing them into seals. Bruce will capture Operator and take all the collected evidence and trust it to House Attorney, Critical God, who will while Batman didn't know where the rabbits were headed, so he trounced Flash and sealed the evidence, giving up all the information he had about the drugs, the arrows, Batman then headed to the arrows and discovered the location of the drop-off. But the Morton squad used the half-off scarecrow who used his weaponized spear toxin to take Batman out. After waking up with Nova asked Agent Fox to take more digital executive that minute. After learning from Rachel that Batman told her there was a day on Scarecrow to drugs. Unfortunately, they said it was poison, but Batman continued to determine Scarecrow while pulling and the things instead. This tells Batman that the boss had really Batman was a mentor and was actually alive and eating the same before Batman led her to that day had the antidote given to her with 2 additional bottles left in her for the first one is not introduction. Upstairs, Bruce was forced to the birthday party with his kid from the he was completely on his plan to Bruce and so he did this Batman and Batman hard all this time and figuring out it seems, a lot harder to use than my lifetime caretaker Alfred is dying. Anyway, after being saved by Alfred, Batman showed up and stopped with the Jedi and he dropped him to his character's Following these events, Batman was again working closely with the find things like activation, chasing everything, seizing everything in the place, and even tracking down the scarecrow, hitting the insane goblins like cars who would appear to the while simultaneously eliminating options to attorney Harvey Dent in the hopes that Harvey could effectively replace Gotham and head to Gotham. To that end, instead of interacting with himself, Harvey Dent would disparage the Gotham because Harvey learned more about his nature. I think this is pretty important to note as it is a continuing character of Harvey Dent. So while right on the corner of Mom, their money suddenly disappeared from their account, like Mom could have vanished with the money, kind of was an expression of Batman having your attention, followed Lau to China, using Lucius Fox him as Bruce had realizing Lau, Bruce was able to get the entire layout of Lau's building using Fox's sonar tech, located the mob accountant, and brought him back to Gotham. Now, the mob couldn't really see that their days were numbered, so they turned to the Joker, who promised to kill the Batman for half of all their money. To draw Batman out, the Joker began a killing spree, but offered to stop if Batman would simply unmask himself. Joker successfully killed the police chief, as well as the judge who agreed to try the mob's RICO case. Batman, needing to get ahead of this, investigates one of the Joker's crime scenes and finds that his next target is the mayor. Wanting to narrow down the list of Joker suspects, Batman drills out a piece of the wall where a bullet had struck and is able to reverse engineer the bullet to find the thumbprint of the shooter, which led to an apartment building overlooking the mayor's parade. Bruce went, but the Joker was one step ahead. Having infiltrated the police force, he was able to get a shot off on the mayor, but Jim Gordon jumped from the gunshot, preventing the mayor's death. After this, Bruce felt that there was no other option than to turn himself in. Sure, he could solve the case without doing so, but how long would it take and how many innocents would die before he did? But Harvey Dent had other plans. He claimed to be the Batman to draw the Joker out, who was eventually captured by Jim Gordon and Batman. However, this was Joker's plan all along, as he had used the dirty cops within the GCPD to abduct Rachel and Harvey. After giving Batman and the police inaccurate information, Joker was able to escape, kill Rachel Dawes, blow up the GCPD, permanently scar Harvey Dent, while making a complete fool of Batman. As if things couldn't get worse, one of Bruce Wayne's employees believes he's found out Batman's identity, and is going to reveal it on TV. Joker, not wanting this to happen, threatens to blow up a hospital unless this employee is killed. While Batman and the GCPD evacuating hospitals and protecting the Wayne Enterprises employee, Joker visits Dent and convinces him to take revenge. So Dent goes on a killing spree of his own, and Joker reveals his ultimate plan. But to find him, Batman is forced to use Lucius's sonar tech to hack Gotham's citizens' phones to map out the entire city and locate the Joker. Upon doing so, Batman deduces that the Joker's thugs are in fact hostages, while the hostages are actually the armed thugs. Batman saves the hostages from a SWAT team, confronts the Joker, and once again, saves the day. However, Batman takes the blame for Harvey Two-Face's murders and retires. Following these events, the Dent Act was put into place and Gotham experienced relative peace for years. During this time, Batman became completely inactive until he was robbed by a mysterious woman. Bruce was able to quickly determine that she was not trying to steal any of his prized possessions, but instead steal his fingerprints, although the woman did end up stealing Bruce's mother's pearls while she was there. After a night of research, he discovered she was futile and desperate. Using a GPS tracker within his mother's pearls, Bruce tracks her to a gala where he retrieves the stolen pearls. From here, Bane is 10 steps ahead of Bruce in steal trade. He uses Bruce's fingerprints to drain Wayne's money, forces him to turn to Talia for help, has Selina betray Bruce, then steals all of his equipment, leaving him broke and broken. Batman fights his way back to Gotham, and alongside the GCPD, as well as Catwoman, slowly breaks down Bane's control over Gotham and puts an end to his reign. He doesn't really do much in the way of detective work in the third installment, and despite being behind the eight ball, moving the entire film, a thrusting plan that was decades in the making, Batman does end up defeating the Shadows for good, so points in for that, I guess. And that's the Dark Knight trilogy Batman done as well, with only 2 Batman left to go, and thankfully only 3 films discussed. So let's get right into the DC Extended Universe Batman. And to be honest with you, it's really hard hard to accurately judge the Batman. Of course, he spent more than a decade as an active Batman, nearly 20 years as he stated, and has crossed paths with dozens of villains, foiling their plans time and time again. The issue is, he doesn't really know anything about these schemes or what detective work he's done in the past. Now, I'm assuming that he's done quite a bit. Obviously, he has been competent, as Jim Gordon has done in the police department, trusted, and in fact, doing various escapades in comics prior to BBS, but doesn't do anything super effective in terms of detective work. But during the investigation, a significant amount of really good work. The only issue being that with chasing red herrings, being played like a violin by Lex Luthor, who was manipulating Batman, even with evidence allowing things to so, how good of a detective could Batman be when in BBS he had the full holdover lives for the entire runtime and the rules of Superman just as much wanted, if not with the intervention of Lois Lane, which but to be completely fair to this fact, at least he would have figured out Superman wasn't completely bombing, and that he didn't kill Wilson, and that Lex was attempting to manipulate Superman, but he was blinded by the rage he had. If he was in his right mind, I don't think this would happen, but I can't say that for sure. So, following BBS, Batman was pretty well, he found out about the other justices and Lex had gathered, they located Aquaman using the Wallace himself. He sent Wonder Woman to find Cyborg, while he took the responsibility of keeping out. Not like he was hiding anywhere secretly, but Batman does look into the struggle of nature. During this movie, Jim Gordon is actually the one who played Brown, which they said while Batman is blatantly doing a lot of work in space with others, he's able to pick up on that awful person. For instance, you can tell that the doctor is still suicidal danger, or in fact, it's a replica, and that Diana wasn't. In reality, he's been for that very easily taken by that. And I guess this isn't really a knock this, but you can tell that Superman was just saying. Finally, let's discuss the Batman, which is pretty clearly going for more of a focus on the detective aspect of the character, which might give him, a little bit of an advantage, but let's take a closer look. In the prequel novel, Batman is doing his due diligence, assisting the GCPD from afar. Here he's able to analyze a sophisticated explosive gel, and the GCPD forensic team is essentially floored at how impressive the analysis of the gel was, and of course, this legwork led to the resolution of the case. But during the events of the Batman film, Bruce's detective skills are really put through the ringer. Since this movie is essentially one long investigation, it would be pretty boring for me to just recap the whole movie, so I think hitting the highlights of the investigation would be more than appropriate. So I'm just going to take a look at what I think is most impressive from Bruce during this entire movie. So Batman is inspecting the Riddler's first murder with the GCPD and deduces that the mayor's thumb was cut off while he was still alive due to ecchymosis around the wound. Ecchymosis is a discoloration of the skin resulting from bleeding underneath it. It's typically caused by bruising, and Bruce was able to determine this with just a look, and not even a very close one with poor lighting. Honestly, I think Bruce and Gordon should have just went down to the local Home Depot and asked if anyone had come in recently to purchase the serial killer starter kit.
I would like to purchase some chloroform, a roll of duct tape, and this gagging bandana.
Throughout the crime scene, he notices important pieces of evidence that the crime scene photographers overlooked. He solves the Riddler's first riddle easily, and of course, we know he recorded the entire experience using his high-tech contact lenses, which assist him in his detective work. These lenses record everything Bruce sees and can even identify people he's looking at. Think of them as proto-detective mode from the Batman Arkham series. I could even see these being upgraded as the series progresses to make them an even more valuable asset. After going over the crime scene, Bruce stays for the police press conference, presumably to see if the Riddler may stand out due to criminals often returning to the scene of the crime. He later attends the mayor's funeral for similar reasons. In his Batcave, Bruce rewatches all the footage recorded and keeps detailed notes for future reference. Additionally, we see that he has deduced that the answer to the first riddle was actually a key to the Riddler's cipher. Alfred then takes over from there, trying to crack the rest of the code. But Bruce suggests that the answer wasn't a partial key, but the entire thing, which ends up being true. The cipher spells out the word drive. Alfred, who had cracked most of the code overnight, doesn't think that the answer could be the real solution, but he turns out to be wrong. In the very next scene, Gordon doubts Batman as well, but also has to eat his words, as the next clue was in the mayor's garage, just as Batman thought. Batman, already knowing what to look for, prompts Gordon to seek out a USB port, where the severed thumb would be. Thumb drive. The drive is, of course, encrypted, but without thinking twice, Batman offers the severed thumbprint as the key to cracking it. He's right again. So in just the first, 30 minutes of the movie, we're shown just how clever Bruce is in this universe, able to solve complex head-scratchers almost instantaneously, even when other experienced detectives and other crackers doubt their skill. From here, Batman hits the streets, interrogating the Penguin, then tailing Selina after noticing how strange she was acting around the photos. Eventually, he begins working with Catwoman, who gets into the club while Batman watches the contact lenses she's wearing. And honestly, it's just about to be solved here, in my opinion. The DA was on the verge of telling Selina the truth until she walked away. You could argue that Batman would have had the answer in just 48 hours after the first murder. But you could also say that the DA would have never moved it up due to his reluctance with Batman later, although that would have been a much more public admission than telling one woman, especially since he was already distraught emotionally, he was on drugs, he had been drinking, he was ready to give up all the information, and he was trying to have sex with Selina. So with all these factors in mind, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to assume that he would actually want to tell who that was, especially with that fact. After the second murder, Batman imposes a second riddle that they figure out the solution. However, after Alfred does some research, he figures out the cipher translates to Elrata, or Elaborate. Batman then experimentation later inaccurately suggests to Penguin's but when he crashes the mayor's funeral, Batman solves the first two riddles easily, but not the third, because that is something only the DA could explain. After being confronted with the news that his father may be involved in corruption, Bruce lays out all the evidence but is interrupted by Selina, who has some more answers which stipulate Falcon, or the Falcon, as in the Rat. So now the Rat has been identified, but has yet to be brought to the light as the Riddler wanted. But eventually, after being dragged out of the Iceberg Lounge, Falcone is taken into the light the Riddler expected him to be, and the Riddler murders Falcone. While you could knock Batman for not putting this together, the quote-unquote light could have been anything, and, that was pretty ambiguous to think that it was a street light right outside of the Iceberg Lounge. After the shooting, Batman and the Gotham City Police Department look over the Riddler's apartment, but Batman is dragged away and requests to meet with him. After being shunned by Batman, Riddler mocks him for not figuring out the final piece of the puzzle.
I have never settled for mediocrity as an acceptable standard, and neither should you.
So Bruce revisits the apartment and is told by a cop that the first murder weapon was a carpet tucker, which Batman uses to unveil the final clue, which leads to the Riddler's big plan. Maybe if Batman had looked into the murder weapon more, he could have located the Riddler's bomb locations before they detonated and saved thousands of lives. However, Bruce missed this small detail in a massive game of Catch Me If You Can. Overall, I think the Batman did excellently and was so close to cracking the case which was one of, if not the most complicated case in any live-action Batman film. Alright, so now that we've finally analyzed all 4 Batmen, which one is truly the world's greatest detective? Well, I think it's safe to say, Bruce, I can't even be bothered to read this entire file. Wayne from the Burton-Schumacher universe is out. I mean, I don't think this guy could even solve the maze on the back of a McDonald's Happy Meal box. Which leaves the 3 most recent iterations. And I also think it's safe to say that we can rule out Bruce, I was played by Lex Luthor the entire movie, Wayne from the DC Extended Universe. While he might be the best, we just don't know enough about his past cases to make any definitive statements. And in the case we do know of, he was blinded by his middle-aged rage and was manipulated into nearly murdering Superman for the villain of the story. So, sorry Batfleck, but you're out.
He's a dark creature of the night.
He's a jackass who wrestles with murderers dressed like clowns and throws them in prison so they can break out of prison and then murder more people.
So now it comes down to The Dark Knight or The Batman. Honestly, I wouldn't be mad at either choice. I think the cases that we see in The Dark Knight specifically and the Batman film are relative in their convolutedness and scale. The Joker and the Riddler crafted exquisitely complicated cases for the Batman to solve, but honestly, both of our heroes kind of lost. The Dark Knight was forced to take the blame for Two-Face, which led to Bane burning down Gotham. The Batman missed a small detail, which led to Riddler drowning Gotham. But both were extremely proactive in their investigations. The Dark Knight was so good at his job that the mob had to hire the Joker. Meanwhile, the Batman did get a bit sidetracked due to his emotions overwhelming him when he was confronted with the fact that his father was involved with Falcone, leading him to blindingly accepting Falcone's and the Riddler's accusations of his father. Using the criteria we established previously, I think the Dark Knight barely edges out the Batman. The Dark Knight cracks the case in Batman Begins, and in the sequel, the Joker's plan, I think, is a bit harder to solve than the Riddler's in the Batman.
I'm the Joker, baby!
The Riddler provided everything Batman needed to solve the case and to stop him, but the Joker used misinformation combined with real clues to keep Batman guessing, chasing rabbit holes, and staying far, far away from the Joker most of the movie. Both villains were playing a game with Batman, but the difference is the Joker was not playing fair. So I think the Dark Knight had the more puzzling case and got just as close to ultimately winning as the Batman did. In The Dark Knight Rises, I think all 4 Batmen would have been in similar situations, although I think Batfleck probably drops Bane on his head after being betrayed by Catwoman, but the plan laid out in that film was so devoid of proper clues or even that much of an opportunity to solve it that every Batman would have ultimately been trapped by Bane and Talia, in my opinion, although, I could be wrong. So again, I think The Dark Knight barely edges out the Batman, while the Bat of Gotham could have a case to be made. And yeah, the Batman from the first 4 films, let's not kid ourselves here. He's the world's worstest detective. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think The Dark Knight is the best, the Batman is the best, the Bat of Gotham, or the OG Batman from Batman 89? Also, be sure to like and subscribe. It does really, really help us out. And be on the lookout for our videos coming up in the next couple weeks. We're ramping up our coverage of The Boys, which should be a lot of fun. And I have a power scaling video for Spider-Man on the way. So, again, thanks for watching, everybody. And remember the motto, it's the world's greatest detective over everything. And I'll see you guys next time.
Sharp blade to your enemies. Only drawn blades and
May honor guide you, Outlander.
prepared. Should try something a little bit tougher. see.
Should hit it with fast ammo.